So the goal and objective of our panel is to really have a very positive and interactive panel. We have a tangible takeaway section that Raina's going to lead at the end. And then Swan here and Kelly and I are really going to focus as well on innovative practices that you can take back to your company after the panel is done.
The first pillar we're going to talk about is innovation. And the question is, what cutting edge projects or initiatives is your company or one of the retail companies that you work with doing to provide the best working environment for women? And what do you find is the most helpful thing a company can do to support women in the workplace? It's a good question. Helena, you want to start?
Yes, sure. I'll start. So I work at Google. I've been the chief of staff for women at Google for 3 years. We started out as the original Lean In Circles for Sheryl Sandberg 10 years ago. We're now 11,000 women in 52 countries across 120 chapters. So we're expanding and we're growing. And what we've really focused on this year is gender equity when it comes to pay. So the first is ensuring that when women come to Google, they usually receive a 30% increase in salary. Everyone's probably a little bit shocked at that, but we really looked at where women are coming from externally, and that often when they come to Google, they're getting paid 30% less. So instead of paying them based on their current salaries, we pay on the role. And that's a really big fundamental change that we're looking at. And then the second thing is trying to just increase gender parity across senior leadership roles. Of course, engineering, CS, we're finding a huge gap in the women who are joining these fields. We start really early when girls are either in middle school or high school. And then also when it comes to our sales organizations, women leadership are few and far between. So those have been the 2 areas of focus for us for women at Google.
Rain?
Okay, so a little context before my answer. So I work for a firm called What If Innovation, and I focus specifically on building high-impact, diverse, and creative organizations, which means I work with executives and leaders to come up with inclusion strategies that allow them to sort of move the needle on their diversity agenda. So my answer is going to be a little bit more on the organizational side, but happy to speak to other things if you have questions. So I would say with the companies I work with, specifically in retail, and then I see it more broadly, there's 3 things that they focus on that allow them to really drive the agenda around how you innovate in terms of diversity around gender. The first thing is community. So they focus on building a community within the organization that allows women to come together and do 2 things. One, have a safe space where they can kind of share stories around any barriers that they're encountering around inclusion, and then also create an environment where you can just feel like what you're experiencing is accepted and it's welcome. So that's the first thing I see, and most organizations that are successful with inclusion with women do that. The second thing is they tend to focus on what I consider acknowledgement. So they're willing to, at the highest levels of the organization, and especially with leaders on board, make it very clear that they need to change the organization in order to include women. And that can happen in a lot of different ways. The typical ones are things like town halls or doing unbiasing training, but making it very clear at the entire organizational level that change must happen and that women and men, sort of all genders, should be embraced. The third thing, and I think the most complicated, is around structures and environment. So I'll give you an example for each. On the environment side, one that I've seen, especially with a retail company I'm working with right now, is that a lot of times the organization has signals throughout that show that men are the only people that can be leaders. So for this specific company I'm working with, leadership happens to all be male dominant. So what they've been doing is looking into the story of the organization and realized that the brand was started by a woman. So what they've done environmentally speaking is they're now putting imagery of their founder, and they're telling stories of their founder alongside the stories of leadership. And that's an important thing, because if you don't see, right, leaders that are women in your organization, then how do you understand that it's something that's attainable for you? And then on the structural side, an example I'll give you guys with another company I'm working with is around how you think about the employee journey. So what can you do from the moment where someone might get hired or interviewed all the way up through the moment where they may be sort of promoted, retained, or offboarded. And so something that happens on the structural side that's kind of interesting is you look at performance reviews and how you can think about changing the dynamic in performance reviews. One example of what one company is doing that's kind of progressive there is they're actually taking self-assessments out of what a manager is allowed to look at when they're evaluating their candidates, because self-assessments tend to skew in a gendered way. So more self-congratulatory behaviors are associated with men, not always, but they are. And a lot of times women aren't willing to sort of show off or talk about themselves in the same way. So if you have a candidate that's performed the same, but a man versus a woman sort of speaking about their performance, the man may appear to be better even if they're the same. So those are sort of the three things that I think are important to think about: community, structures and environment, and acknowledgement, if you want to think about how you kind of push the agenda for women in innovation.
That's fascinating. It was really interesting about the reviews. I'd love to do like a blind test to see how that would really prove itself out. It's interesting. Kelly, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I come from a different angle. I run a social think tank, and I have a Women to Watch program. And the way that I like to hit the topic of thinking about inclusion and diversity is, a lot of people say, well, you know, we're colorblind, we accept everybody, but really inclusion is the act of making everyone feel welcome. So if you think about the statement that I like to share is the Credit Suisse did a six-year study of companies making 10 billion or more in revenue, and when there was at least one woman on the board, those companies made 26% more. So I think it gets the attention of the executives when you can understand that there's more profit to be made when you create an inclusive environment for women and then every other voice that hasn't been heard yet.
Great, thank you. All right, so we're going to go to our next pillar, and the pillar is called allies. So Swan, maybe you can start with this one. What's the balance between including men in the women at conversation intersectionally and providing women-only opportunities for development?
I know we didn't do introductions, but if you see my name up there real quick, guys, I'm not at Walmart. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you on my behalf, but I'm at Swan,
yeah.
Sit, one word. So if you do have questions, feel free to ping me.
I meant to point that out also. Helena, you're not at K Lobaugh either.
We could see if they'll find us eventually. It's digital. I work in digital.
Sure, Casey would
I'm sure
appreciate
it'll
it.
find us eventually. I'm excited to talk about this topic because while I do digital transformation in really large legacy companies, I've been doing it a long time in beauty. And while there's no fixed number I'm going for gender parity of the mix of genders on my team, diversity of thought and experience is always important. And what's interesting about beauty is that, like most retail, right, it is predominantly female in the employee base, right? 70, 80% of these employees are female, yet the best-in-class companies, their leadership mix is 50-50 male to female, best in class. And that's what we're trying to aim for, not even representative of the mix of employees. So I think as we think about allies, it's a larger conversation about how you start building bridges between senior leadership and existing employee bases, right? To what you were saying before, if women who are growing in these careers don't see women in the executive offices, they don't even know to strive for it, right? How do you create avenues where people can make allies, right? And by actually having affinity groups, right, which can be gender-based but can be topically based, you start bridging conversations between different types of people, regardless of gender, race, age, who happen to care about the same things, and they can be cool topics that are basically plaguing our industry, right? We're in retail innovation. If we're talking about the death of brick and mortar, the use of influencers and social, these task forces are a way to start mixing those people. The other thing we can do, and I know there's a separate question about mentorship, but I want to talk about it here because it's about allies. We structure a lot of mentorship programs where we have senior leadership mentoring junior people, which is great. Now, whether they actually get to find time on their calendars to do those meetings, whether they're really rich and deep conversations, that's another story. But one thing I built at one of my previous companies was a reverse mentoring program, right? Because if you're in retail, you've got to care about digital and social right now. But your C-level execs are not Snapchatting. They're not doing Instagram stories. They might have a Facebook account and they're still trying to figure things out. So flip the mentoring program upside down. Have your high potential, younger, and if you're in retail or beauty or luxury or apparel, female up-and-coming power players mentor your CEOs and CFOs and heads of marketing. Because now they're getting a lot of content and value out of it. Instead of just saying, I'm investing in someone's career, they're like, I'm learning about the things that my consumers are doing to figure out how to get my brands into people's hands, get into their minds. If I don't know how to do that, I may not want to ask somebody, hey, I don't know how to Snapchat. But if you've got an ongoing relationship with a millennial, somebody who is as close to that customer is your customer, you're going to have a much better chance of understanding that consumer, their behaviors, their wants and needs. So the reverse mentoring is a way not only then to start creating those allies we're talking about, but you can start identifying high potential future leaders early on, because they might be really functionally good at their job, or maybe they're not, and they're not in the right role, but you can start seeing those elements of leadership come through in these conversations. We've had, our reverse mentors coach our C-level execs on not only how to post their for Snapchat, how to curate their identity on Instagram, but we'll take them in store walks. We'll go to brick and mortar, and the C-level execs will watch how these millennials, these females who are buying makeup, shop every day, and it's fundamentally changed their thinking on how we go to market, what our innovation pipeline looks like, and how we talk to consumers.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go to Raina for a second and ask if you want to address the allies topic, and then we're going to move on to mentorship as well.
Yes, I would love to. So I think the ally topic is extremely nuanced, and it's incredibly contextual. So what I mean by that is, everybody knows a woman, right? Like most people either have a mom or a daughter or somebody that they can relate to the female experience. So I think the idea of allies is one that can be very divisive, like, oh, the conversation about women should just be with women. And I think we have to sort of, have a little bit of humanity around that and just recognize that everyone can say something about women because they have in some circumstance known a woman or have a daughter. And so you have to reach common ground when you're thinking about this concept of allies. So I think that's an important level set. The second thing I'll say is about mentorship.
So I'm seeing mentorship at a higher level, and then in turn, those women turn around and help the younger women down the line.
It's great to have the perspectives from all the different levels in the organization and how it can work, collaboratively. It's really
Last year of our 80 women to watch, 40 are in new titles, and
Okay.
with our 20 retail executives who meet quarterly, 22 promotions. That's going to inspire other women.
Thank you. So Helena, I'm going to ask you if you want to address the next topic first. This pillar is called community support. So what would you say, what outreach or community efforts does Google provide to women outside of the workplace?
Yeah, so we are very much looking at computer science programs. So in 1984, 34% of women graduated with a computer science degree. Today, it's only 17%. Just an interesting stat. I think we have a huge gap to address. So the first one is Made with Code. It's a national program to encourage women to get involved with computer science. I see some people nodding their head. We have Google AR and VR programs that launch, so women in schools can actually put these headsets on and talk to scientists and engineers almost in a more personal capacity to get excited about this. The second one is CS First, so thinking really young, putting out content programs, workshops, so girls who are even in kindergarten can figure out about robotics or engineering. The next one is Mind the Gap, so it's a pre-university effort for women who are thinking about college majors to get involved. Influence the Influencer, which is my personal favorite, so thinking about the top influencer for your children is probably the parents. So equipping moms and dads with the speaking points about how to have an authentic conversation around engineering and computer science. And then the last one is Women in Technology. So small outreach groups for women who are in tech startups who need, whether it's public speaking, business logistics, or even just a network to talk to. This is kind of the way that we're thinking about community outreach at every single level to address the gender gaps that we're seeing across Google and across the industry as a whole.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Swan, are there some community efforts that you wanted to address at Elizabeth Arden?
Absolutely. I think in terms of influencer marketing and earned media value, this is probably one of the few industries where influencers and EMV actually outperform paid media. So in thinking about that, we're talking about these influencers who love beauty products. They have videos showing you what they bought and doing how-tos on end. So who better to tap into than this community? So what we do is we have our top tier. So I was an ex-consultant. I tend to do things in buckets of 3, right? So the top tier of influencers are the really big global ones. We have our brand ambassadors like Gwen Stefani and Sierra. Those are not new to the industry. Tier 2 is like maybe there's few 100,000, few million followers, right, like a Gigi Gorgeous or Candy, those we use in a much more broadcast scale. But this third tier of micro-influencers, where it's somebody doing videos at home who's maybe never been paid for any content, right, who just loves this industry, they might have a few thousand followers, but at scale, if you reach them, not only are they more flattered and so surprised to be reached out to by a major brand, right, in mass, when you add them up, their force against the spend is going to be far more of an impact than any of the other pillars. So what I'm starting to do is construct programs where we reach out to them. We just send them product. It's the cost of product. For one of my programs, I spent $8,000, having a vendor kit a cute little box of products that we sent out for each of these guys and just said, thanks for being a beauty lover. Check out some of our products. We throw our hashtags in for them in case they wanted to post. And in $8,000 spent, gave us $114,000 in earned media value. And that was like a little test for us. So now we're starting to use this influencer community, no matter how big. I don't care if you have 30 fans, but if you're authentic and you speak in our voice, we're gonna help grow you. We'll help grow your career. You'll help grow our user base. And that, I think, in turn creates opportunities, job opportunities for people that we would never have thought to recruit from, right? I mean, so it's a new way to bring innovation in-house. It's a way to spread our brand and democratize it a little bit more. But through that, then we can start doing even more local activations that don't necessarily revolve around beauty, but just thought leaders and people who care.
And I think one of the most important words you used in that discussion about influencers was authenticity. We've been having these discussions in other discussions during this event, and so it's so important. And no matter how small their influencing group is, just being authentic is the key, to making that work. So, Kelly, did you want to address the topic of community?
I love community. One project that we're doing, we try to do some non-for-profit work too, and it was really a male CEO, actually, Mike from PetFlow, was he noticed the opportunity for young men to get analytical skills, SQL, different kinds of analytical knowledge that will help you move in your career. Those young men get in the natural chemistry of men working with men. So right now we're working on a program where we're trying to put a group of, we're doing it in New York, a group of leaders where companies know they can introduce their young women to mentorship, where we can, and we're still thinking through it, so if anybody has ideas on this, please let me know. But it is giving them some quick one-on-one. It doesn't have to be really intense and long. It's just the opportunity to understand some of those skills that you need in order to move up in certain roles. And I think you probably know what I'm talking about.
Thank you. All right, we're going to open it up for questions for a few minutes before we move into our interactive exercise. So does anyone have a question for our panelists? Anyone? All right, let's, go ahead. Adam's coming behind you. Thank you.
Hi there. Thank you guys for being here and speaking on this topic. It's relevant to me, I'm sure. Well, it's relevant to everyone, right? Question, and this might be for Helena, because you work at Google and the first Lean In. I'm also a leader of a Lean In circle at my company within New York, and we're part of the tech community and everything. Company is called Bluecore, anyway. But are there other companies that you look up to that are doing this especially well? And it's kind of like that same question from a professional standpoint, and then also a personal standpoint. Any mentors that you have learned from or would recommend, kind of from the public eye, TED Talks, or books to read, that type of thing, that align with this, vision and topic?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. I guess to address the mentorship first, I think it's something that has to be authentic internally. Again, going back to that word, an authentic, organic relationship. We've actually done a lot of mentoring programs through Women At, and they just haven't worked out. And I think the heart of it is that you can't find a mentor that feels forced. It has to be a natural relationship. But I think through 20% projects or 10% projects, not only giving women an ability to reach into different sectors and growing their kind of core career knowledge, but also their network of women, and that usually leads to strong mentorship. And then in terms of other companies, man, I think of J&J, L'Oreal, the She Leads, always a girl, a lot of these advertisers that we work with are now being tasked to advertise in a way that is kind of relevant and speaks to their core values. If they are thinking women's empowerment, but they're targeting women in not the most positive ways through their advertising, that I think is really inspiring to me. So I often look to L'Oreal. And then Swan over here on my right, our companies work together, obviously, and I think Elizabeth Arden and Revlon are doing some really innovative things, and I'm sure she can also speak to it.
Yeah, actually, I look up to these guys. I'm always like, Helena, what programs are you guys running, and how can I try to implement that in my company? And I think part of it is just awareness of where you guys are, right? I know that there's a disparity between my employee base and my C-level execs, so I focus on programs to tackle that. Because to be honest, it's not going to be fixed overnight, right? But there are bigger discussions, macro ones like pay disparity, right? You know, on National Equality Pay Day, I send my, because we're at what, 70 cents to the dollar-ish? I send my team home 70% through the day. So it's like 240, I send them home. We make statements like that. We focus on a few issues to tackle at once. We figure out what we can scale, but it's actually by talking to each other. Because this is, you know, sometimes we go to these conferences and we kind of talk about cool campaigns we've run, cool strategies, but we don't give anyone the secret sauce. No one wins if we're too private about our ideas here. So it is coming into circles, talking between companies, sharing ideas, because this is not one where there's like such an immediate kind of intellectual property that, you know, you're going to ruin a launch of a product. This is good for all of us, right? So I think by connecting with women like this on stage, sharing ideas, that's where you get that 1 + 1 possibly equaling 3.
All right, great. So we're at the point where we have a few minutes left to do our exercise. So I'm going to, Raina, turn it over to you to handle the last part.
Sure. So I think this exercise will be quick, and I actually think it can kind of seamlessly move into Q&A if there's more questions, and we hope that it might spark some additional questions. But first question is, does everyone have a piece of paper relatively near them that they could steal from a neighbor or? Okay.
Paper and pens everywhere in this room.
Awesome. So you want a piece of paper and a pen. It'll be pretty straightforward. We won't ask you to draw anything, I promise. And basically, what we want to do is kind of harness the energy of this room. So everybody here in this room is interested in the topic of women in business, women in innovation, and particularly in a retail environment. And so we want to give you a moment to kind of reflect on this idea of how we can support women being sort of a force for change in business. So we're going to ask you to take 1 minute to write one thing down. 1 minute, one thing that you think you could do to sort of provide upward mobility for women or a woman you know in business. Just take a minute. It's an individual exercise. Write one thing down. There won't be pressure to share, but if you're inclined, we might have a quick chat. Awesome.
Do we have any Jeopardy music?
I know, right?
I'm not singing, so that's
Okay. Looks like we have a few still writing, but that's fine. Just want to open it up. If there's anything you'd like to share, often with topics like this, just an opportunity to make a little bit of a commitment and share some of the things that you might do just increases the sort of opportunities for all of us. So any takers might want to share what they wrote down?
somebody has to volunteer.
I'll start. I'm going to expand my Women to Watch program.
Nice, nice. Someone over there?
Hi, yeah. It's kind of a low-tech thing, but a lunch and learn. We've done this at various companies I've worked for. Lunch and learn. Everyone's there. Bring your lunch. Have another woman who's higher level, just to chat with anyone, any woman in there, and just to kick around ideas and thoughts.
I love that. I feel like sometimes simple things like that get ignored, but they can actually be a difference maker. Like that's where you pick up a tip on how to get better at negotiating, or it's the informal stories that sometimes really help. Cool. Any others?
So, over here, I work in technology, and I've worked with our HR department to come up with the appropriate procedures. When I interview candidates, female candidates who don't make the cut, I've formed a network outside of our company to provide some coaching, mentoring, and networking opportunities to kind of get referrals in place and, keep encouraging that. And also particularly when people are really earlier in the career, it's hard to know, there are so many different directions you can go in the technology space, and it's hard to know that if you haven't been experience, if you don't have the experience in the business world, thinking about people fresh out of college. So providing opportunities for them to be exposed to other types of work, even if they're not directly job opportunities, just networking in the area to really encourage women to stay and grow in the technology space and open their eyes to, you're coming in as a developer, but, think about these other, more soft skills that are super valuable in the technology space that, might help lever you into your career more quickly.
That's amazing. It's cool.
Hey there. Hi, my name's Anne Marie Stevens. So I want to be able to, if anybody does not agree with this, you can finger point me very clearly on who said it. So I think all of this is very valuable, and I've recently had the opportunity to do a presentation for women in technology on this topic. I speak a lot on tech, so it was fun to talk about this. One of the things I'm passionate about, all of this is very valuable, but women as individuals, we have to look within ourselves to take the action for ourselves and not look outside. And it's the action of being uncomfortable, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. So when we see things that are maybe rubbing us the wrong way, or whatever the case may be within the business environment, that we need to take that step and be vocal and address it, because it's our job now to educate, right, and be the action point. So I really think the action starts within us. All of these programs are wonderful and great, and we should continue to do that, but the other piece is put it into action, which is if you hear something, if you see something, say something, because it's now our job to say, you know what? Oh, that, when you said that, it made me uncomfortable, and here's why. It's another way to approach it, because a lot of I think our function is to educate, right? We have to be our own evangelists in furthering our own advancement. So that's my perspective.
My name's Mike. I'm from FSAstore.com. This is just an idea coming from something we've done at our company. So when I started, we were very much in a startup phase and very male-dominated. In growing, we have a lot more, we have female leadership that's become more prevalent, as well as just females throughout obviously, the workforce. What we've done, besides leadership mix-ups, is we've created a culture committee. And I feel like previously, I can give the first culture event I had when I came to the company was a beer pong event, right? So that's just kind of an example. Maybe more male-dominated, not sure, but that's just a suggestion there. But when we have now a culture committee that's just not just a nice mix of men and women, it's very diverse as well. All of our events now, our events that are participated by the entire company are more diverse and inclusive of everyone. So I think a culture committee is something that's really helped us, and that's definitely something that I would suggest for other companies as well.
That's a great point.
We're going to wrap up soon, but we'll let the last two. Go ahead, Ruth.
Oh, okay. So I try to be a role. I'm Ruth. I try to be a role model as a working mom to women who look at me and say, wow, she makes it look so easy. And I'm like, oh, no. Let me just tell you, this is not easy. And I think what that does as I help them, and they could be 20 and not married, or being married and thinking about having kids or whatever, but my aim is to say to them, don't stop striving just because you want to get married and have kids, which is all great, or if you don't, that's perfect too. But you don't have to stop your career. You can keep going as well, if not better, than any man. So it gives them those, the ability to feel confident about that and try to provide encouragement to keep going on their career path as they go forward in their personal life.
So my name is Pano, and we run a retail and consumer goods accelerator in New York City, but I want to call your attention to a plug here for the Women in Entrepreneurship panel at the New School with Kay Unger, who had a multi-$100-million fashion business back in the 70s and 60s before entrepreneurship even made sense in many cases. And then Kate Koplovitz, who was the former CEO of USA Networks. There's about 100 women showing up for this at 6 p.m. at the New School.
Thanks, Pano. So we've gone over, so I think we're going to wrap up.
Thank you.